Okay, let's dive into the mind's hidden world, a place that can be both a sanctuary and a prison.
We all let our minds wander, right? But what happens when that wandering becomes a destination?
For some, it's not just a quick escape. It's a whole other life.
So you see the difference? It's not a mental vacation, it's more like a permanent home. This is what's known as maladaptive daydreaming, and it's so immersive it can totally disrupt real life.
These folks aren't just visiting this inner world. Nope, they're the architects, building it from scratch.
And this incredible inner world actually has a name, a paracosm, a whole universe inside their head.
I mean, look at this. We're talking a full cast of characters, complex plots, even its own history.
So, the big question is, why? Why build such a massive, detailed escape route from reality?
Well, at its heart, it's a coping mechanism, a pretty powerful act of self-preservation, actually.
It's often born from a world that feels unsafe or just unfulfilling, things like trauma or deep loneliness.
So when reality is just too painful, the mind does something amazing. It just builds a better one.
And check out this contrast. In the real world, they might feel powerless. In their paracosm, they're the hero.
But here's the thing. This brilliant solution creates its own, really profound problem.
See, the fantasy world starts out as a refuge, a safe place.
You can think of it like a lifeboat, something to keep you afloat in a stormy reality. But the very thing that saves the dreamer, well, this is where the tragic twist comes in. It can also become their prison, a beautiful, perfect prison they can't escape from. Inside that world, they're the master storyteller, the god of their own private universe. But here's the catch. They're also its only inhabitant. So the price of admission to that perfect world? It's often giving up on the real one.
We often think of daydreaming as just simple, fleeting thoughts. But for some people, it's an act of profound, unconscious creativity.
Yeah, this experience is far from some flimsy, improvised fantasy.
Instead, they hold every key creative role in their own amazing production.
Basically, they're the architect of their own long-running epic series. And this inner world, or paracosm, is the actual blueprint for the whole experience. These are not simple stories. We're talking complex narratives that evolve over years.
And, well, every world has its inhabitants, right?
They're known as paramis. And believe me, these characters are not simple cutouts.
For the dreamer, they're often deeply complex with their own full-blown personalities.
So they end up fulfilling a deep and often unmet need for connection and belonging. So the crucial point here is that this is a real neurochemical attachment. And in this world, the daydreamer has their very own idealized avatar.
This paraself is literally everything the dreamer wishes they could be.
And this perfectly illustrates the compensatory nature of the whole fantasy.
So, how does this intricate world feel so breathtakingly real? The answer isn't just in your head.
There's almost always a kinetic ritual that unlocks a deeper state of immersion.
This physical action is like a key. It's a form of self-hypnosis. The combination of mind and body creates a powerful, almost addictively real sensory experience.
So, you should take away from this the profound purpose behind this creation.
So, here's the big question. How does a safe place in your mind turn into a trap? Well, this isn't just a bad habit. It's a behavioral addiction, powered by your brain's reward system. The escape gives you this perfect high, but it always leads to a crushing real-world low. It actually follows a classic 4-stage cycle. Let's break down how that trap really works. You've got the trigger, the ritual, the reward, and then the consequence. Let's start at the top. First up, the trigger. The cycle kicks off with a cue that creates this powerful urge to escape.
Things like boredom or stress ignite that craving for a perfect imaginary world.
Next up is the ritual. The dreamer does something specific to consciously start the fantasy.
Basing, putting on headphones, these physical acts basically tell the brain it's time to go. And then, step 3, the reward. This is exactly why the whole cycle is so addictive.
Your brain gets flooded with dopamine. To your neurons, that emotional high feels completely real.
But of course, that high doesn't last. Eventually, the dreamer has to wake up.
Suddenly, you realize hours, literally hours, have passed, and the real world comes crashing back. That brief moment of euphoria, it gets replaced by this huge wave of guilt and shame.
And here's the truly clever part. This is how the trap resets itself perfectly.
All that guilt and shame, well, that becomes the new trigger you need to escape from. So the daydream becomes an escape from the guilt that the daydreaming itself created.
But just recognizing this pattern for what it is, that's the first step to breaking free.
You see, the real danger isn't the fantasy, it's what it does to your reality. And this is way more than just daydreaming. It's like building a whole private universe.
But this can start to dismantle your ability to function. So, where does it all begin?
Well, the very first casualty is your focus. The real world just can't compete.
I mean, just look at this. Real life can seem kind of boring next to an epic fantasy.
So your mind gets pulled back into that fantasy, right in the middle of, say, a meeting.
And the consequences? They're very real. Your work, your school, everything can suffer.
Okay, so after focus goes, the next thing to take a hit is social connection.
Yeah, real relationships just can't measure up. They start to feel like, well, work.
It's not that you mean to pull away, it's just the fantasy feels so much better.
And all of this leads to the biggest casualty of all, your actual sense of self.
Your fantasy self starts to feel more real than the you who, does laundry. And that creates this huge, painful gap between your two worlds, a total disconnect.
Suddenly, your real self, it starts to feel like you're just wearing a mask, while that fantasy self feels like the real you, the true face underneath.
So you're not really living two separate lives. What's actually happening here?
You become like a ghost, haunting your own life. Physically there, but mentally gone.
It's a huge paradox, right? How do you escape a prison you've actually come to love?
Look, just trying to stop is a fight you're pretty much guaranteed to lose every time. So this isn't a war against your imagination. It's about building a bridge to reality.
Step 1 is huge. It's all about becoming aware, but without all the judgment.
Let's be clear, this is a coping mechanism. It's not a moral failing or who you are.
So you have to shift from thinking I am broken
To knowing I have a coping mechanism I can manage. That right there changes everything.
All right, step 2, time to put on your detective hat and identify your triggers. You gotta ask yourself, what real-world stuff sends you retreating into that fantasy? Maybe it's boredom, a weird social moment, or a deadline. Just naming them gives you power.
And now for step 3. This is the big one, bridging those two worlds.
Your fantasy world isn't the enemy. It's basically a treasure chest of your deepest values.
Daydreaming you're a rock star? Okay, cool. Now, just pick up a real guitar and learn one chord. Dreaming of epic adventures? Awesome. How about planning a small, real trip nearby?
Listen, this process is slow and honestly kind of terrifying. It's a courageous choice.
The whole goal is to be the director of your mind, not the addict. You're in charge.
It really all comes down to having the guts to finally live an unscripted life.
So, the only question left is, what's going to be the first scene in your unscripted life?